button. So, welcome everybody to this webinar. We have just checking the technology there. So, welcome. We have about 60 people attending from around the world. So, hello wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. We are fortunate to have Costas from the Commission today, whom I'll introduce in about sort of 5 minutes or so. And Costas is the policy officer picking up the whole areas around the EPR issue. And we thank Costas very much for his time today. So just a bit of protocol again, for those who just joined, we will be taking the questions in the Q&A initially. So please post your questions there, not in the chat. If we don't have any questions in the Q&A, we will then look at the chat. Please keep your questions short and concise. If they are too long, we just won't have the time to process them. So please make your questions really clear and succinct. I think without further ado, I'll move into the slides. So this webinar is being delivered by the Blue Circular Economy project, and who have a range of different partners from around Europe, the Danish Technical University, NTNU in Norway, who are the project leads, WDC in Ireland, and ERI in Scotland. And this particular project really is around focusing around business opportunities associated with waste fishing gear. And this is, I think, the 10th in a series of webinars that CFSD, my organization, has delivered within the project. So, so one could argue the fishing gear issue is a bit of a wicked problem. A lot of complexities to it. At the moment, a lot of the fishing gear, when it comes to the end of life, will go to landfill. There are still instances of the fishing gear being burnt, but there is also fishing gear that ends up in the sea. The sort of typical streams are nylon, polypropylene and polyethylene, and often there is a market for the PA, the nylon, but there is more challenging issues associated with the polypropylene and polyethylene. So we often see, not just the landfilling, but the issue of stored waste, at harbors, etc. And really, we need a sort of paradigm shift associated with thinking in circularity and moving from thinking about waste to thinking about the embedded value in products, materials, and components. So, a mind shift. What we found in working in the area between two projects, the Circular Ocean project and the Blue Circular Economy project, is that it's a very complex area with multiple stakeholders, multiple interests, and it's often difficult to get really clear information. And there is a lot of dispersed, diffuse information that one has to synthesize. So what we've also found is the challenge of numbers, and this whole issue, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We've seen variations in quotes saying that fishing gear is between 10 and 70% of overall ocean marine plastics. The Commission's work has identified about 28%. So the number is a big number. And what we've really started to see over the last sort of 3 or so years is increased policy interest, both in the marine plastics issue and the passing of the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and within that, the EPR scheme. But you're seeing other countries like Canada also taking a lot of interest around the fishing gear issue, and some work we did looking at the state of the art in circular economy across the G20 countries indicated that a common issue that all the G20 were tackling with is the ocean marine plastic. So that stage, when we did our research about a year ago, the fishing gear wasn't so identified as an issue. but colleagues in the Global Ghost Gear Initiative were called to presentations at the G7 recently around ghost gear. So, and indeed, there was a recent documentary that showed the challenges of fishing gear. So we got growing policy interest, and then we've got growing interest in standards, and there is work starting within SEN, TC 466 on the circular design of fishing gear, and that's still at the very early stages. So from a sort of pragmatic context and not a legal context, some of the differences between the EPR scheme for fishing gear compared with previous EPR schemes in electronics, vehicles and packaging is a lot of the activity will focus more on the sort of coastal areas because of the nature of the product. So you won't see fishing gear being, or unlikely to be seeing fishing gear coming to the end of life in the center of a country, maybe. So a lot of the activities will be in the regions around coastal areas. And from work we've done, particularly in Ireland and in Norway, we found when we've run sort of stakeholder meetings between those interested in the waste fishing gear issue, there are very broadly two types of systems or subsystems that will sit there of people, and those are the sort of business innovation system and those within the fishing system. And often they don't really talk. So a key issue is bringing those groups together to start a conversation, because moving towards the EPR scheme will mean new stakeholders talking to one another. So stakeholder dialogue is very important. And again, creating those networks of people to liaise, bring knowledge in, etc. And that will also be true not just with the EPR scheme and looking at recycling, the logistics networks, but also there'll need to be innovation if we are thinking about designing nets to be easier for dismantlability, potentially new materials, etc. So the innovation will be required. And what's perhaps starting to emerge a little bit is, again, going back to the numbers issue, there's still really a lack of clarity over a lot of the end-of-life numbers at ports, sort of city areas, harbour areas. But one of the dialogues at present is that the volume of nets coming to the end of life, in individual ports, may be relatively low in a number of instances. So there may be this need for much more regional systems where a number of ports and harbours link up to deliver materials for recycling. So this whole logistics side of this and looking at volumes is this growing and emerging research and understanding about the practicalities of this. So effectively what we have within the member states at the moment is two recyclers of any major scale. There are others starting to emerge, and a number of companies have looked at recycling of fishing gear, but they haven't entered the market. And again, from my experience, particularly in the electronics sphere, some resource management companies may not enter the market until they have more clarity, on the legislation, etc., and the timetable. So they will wait, and then maybe move in. But again, it may be that the large players may not see enough volume there. So we've got one major mechanical recycler, which is Plastics Globals in Denmark. We have Aquafil, who use a chemical recycling process to deliver a second life fiber called Economy, and that which is going to clothing and other items. And as I say, we've got a number of others bubbling up. We also, through our research, have seen quite extensive repair of nets by the fishermen. So, and it sort of makes sense because a lot of the nets cost a lot of money. So therefore, it makes sense that fishermen are sweating their asses. So there's a lot of repair. So a lot of nets have multiple lives. We see some reuse, both, of nets, delivered to, outside of Europe, to Africa or whatever, and some reuse of nets into other products. I've seen a number of people starting to experiment with 3D printing using waste filament from nets, but we've really only identified one commercial supplier of filament from nets, and that's Fishy Filaments. I think they're on the call today. What we've also identified is that because of that, the relative newness of this market, is the value chain in many instances not so mature. So there's going to be an issue as we move towards 2024 and the implementation of legislation, that we'll need to fill the gaps in the value chain there. And again, how the materials or chemical recycling companies emerge in the different member states is, going to be something that I guess is going to be a key issue. So it's how we build that infrastructure. In terms of commercialization, and I'm thinking more about the products that are derived from waste fishing gear, reusing the nets, using pellets from the nets into products. At this stage, it's very small scale, smaller businesses, and underdeveloped. So, and in terms of building the market, if you sense, for the reuse of nets into other products, or filament into products, or pellets into products, we've got a whole issue about the market, and the market for secondary materials, which is another topic. How could green public procurement, for example, be used in local port city areas to create markets for products, for example? So where have we been? Well, really, it's still a relatively new issue. Until sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was a raising of awareness through various documentaries, Blue Planet, etc. And suddenly saw the pictures on our TV screens of seals entangled with nets, etc., etc. And then we had a very significant move with the single-use plastics directive. And we're sort of presently, a situation where the standard is starting on circular design, and the timetables are starting to, be implemented in the EPR scheme. And a future, I guess we will, in some shape or form, have this much more organized infrastructure to recycle and reuse the net. So I'll now say thank you, and I will pass across to Costas. And can I just use Costas? So Costas is the policy officer for DG Mare for the European Commission, and has a background in production management engineering, and worked in both the private sector and public sector. And in addition to starting his role in DG Mare, has worked in a range of roles throughout the Commission. And in talking to Costas, I know he brings a lot of that experience to these discussions. So I'll now pass across to Costas, and welcome and thank you very much, Costas.
Well, thank you, Martin, for this invitation. Hello to everybody. Before I start, just to mention that a couple of seconds ago, I received a message that my internet connection is unstable. This is most worrying. I hope it remains stable until the end of this session. So yes, hello everybody. Indeed, for the last 4 months, I have been working in DG Mare. Before that, I was working for DG Competition, a completely different subject, but now I am in DG Mare. So next slide, please. And I'm going to present you today the single-use Plastic Directive, and in particular, the provisions of that directive concerning fishing gear. Before that, I will give you a small background, but Martin has already given more or less this background. And after the provisions presented from the Single-Use Plastic Directive, I will present the request of the Commission towards the European Standardization Office, requesting for a standard for the circular design of fishing gear. Next one, please. Now, too much plastic in the ocean, that's a fact. It not only harms the environment, it also harms economy in general. In particular, the fishing activities, shipping activities, tourism activities. It threatens marine life either by ingestion or entanglement. And it has been estimated that the cost of the environmental damage is approximately $13 billion per year. Now, someone could say the numbers I give here are too low, too big. Well, in any event, it's a lot. Next slide, please. Concerning plastic waste, the impact assessment that took place before the drafting of the Single-Use Plastic Directive identified two main sources of plastic waste: single-use plastic products and fishing gear. On the average, fishing gear represents approximately 27% of beach macroliter count. And it is also estimated that European fishing boats lose approximately every year 11,000 tons of fishing nets. Next one, please. In this context, I would like to highlight the European Green Deal, which aims at tackling climate and environmental related challenges. And among other, it calls for clean and circular economy, zero pollution, preserving and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity. Next one, please. I would also like to highlight the Circular Economy Action Plan, which calls for the design of sustainable products, plastics included, and decoupling economic growth from resource use. Therefore, it calls for reducing waste, reusing and recycling material. Next one, please. With this context in mind, one of the outcomes of European Union policy is the Single-Use Plastic Directive. Next one, please. And I start by presenting definitions given by that directive. First, fishing gear, which means equipment used either in fishing or aquaculture in order to do three things: target, capture, or rear marine biological resources, or equipment, floating equipment that is used in order to do, again, those three things: target, capture, or rear marine biological resources. When it comes now to waste fishing gear, the Single-Use Plastic Directive refers to the Waste Framework Directive, meaning any substance or object which is to be discarded or intended to be discarded or has to be discarded. Next one, please. Concerning the definition of producer of fishing gear, the Single-Use Plastic Directive here distinguishes uses three different situations. The first situation is when the producer is established in a particular member state, and the second situation when he's not established in a particular in that member state, but he's established in another member state or in another country. So the person that is established in a member state is the producer. In this case is the person who professionally manufactures, sells, or imports and places on the market fishing gear. And in the second case is the person established in another member state or in a third country who professionally sells by distant contracts fishing gear. In both occasions, the Single-Use Plastic Directive does not consider fishermen to be producers of fishing gear. Next one, please. For the definition of extended producer responsibility scheme, the Single-Use Plastic Directive refers again to the Waste Framework Directive, which defines extended producer responsibility scheme as a set of measures taken by a member state, ensuring that the producers, in this case of fishing gear, bear the financial responsibility or the financial and organizational responsibility for the management of waste, and in this case, waste fishing gear. Next one, please. Another three definitions for which the Single-Use Plastic Directive refers again to the Waste Framework Directive: collection, separate collection, and treatment of waste. Collection, the gathering of waste in order to be transported to be treated. Separate collection, where we have a separately kept waste stream of waste. And treatment, all the operations that take place in order to recover material or the disposal of waste. Next one, please. Now, the Single-Use Plastic Directive, firstly, and I start with the third bullet point of this slide, is that member states have to set up extended producer responsibility schemes for fishing gear according to the provisions set by the Waste Framework Directive when it matters to schemes. At a later point, we will make a small parenthesis in order to see what the Waste Framework Directive provides for as minimum requirements for those schemes. Now, member states have also to define clearly the roles and the responsibilities of the actors involved in those schemes. Producers should be allowed by member states to appoint their representatives in other member states in order when they want to sell fishing gear. Furthermore, member states with marine waters, they have to set national minimum annual collection rates of waste fishing gear. Next one, please. Producers have to cover particular costs, and those are the costs for the separate collection of waste fishing gear, the cost for its transport to the treatment facilities, and the cost of its treatment. Furthermore, producers have to cover for costs for awareness raising measures, which have to provide information about reuse systems, waste management options, and furthermore, they have to provide information on the impact of littering and the impact of inappropriate disposal of waste. Member states also have to lay down rules on penalties concerning infringements of national provisions in relation to extended producer responsibility schemes. Next one, please. Member states also have to report every year to the Commission how much fishing gear has been placed on the market of their territory and how much waste fishing gear has been collected in that member state. Member states have to provide that information within 18 months of the end of that reporting year. And the Single-Use Plastic Directive states that the first reporting period is the calendar year of 2022. The reported data that is to be submitted to the Commission has to be also accompanied by a quality check report in order to ensure consistency of data submitted by the different member states. Next one, please. The Commission now, the obligations of the Commission under the Single-Use Plastic Directive is that first, the Commission has to request from the European Standardization Committee a standard for the circular design of fishing gear. We will see this request later on. Furthermore, the Commission has to review the data on concerning fishing gear placed on the market and waste fishing gear collected. That has been reported by the member states. And the Commission has to adopt an implementing act which would lay down the format for the data to be reported. This act has been recently adopted by the Commission. Actually, it was adopted on the 31st of May 2021. Next one, please. The Commission also has to evaluate the Single-Use Plastic Directive by the 3rd of July 2027. And after that, it has to report to the Parliament and the Council with a study which, if considered appropriate, that depends on the information gathered on binding collection rates for waste fishing gear. Next one, please. Extended producer responsibility schemes and national annual collection targets for waste fishing gear have to be established by the member states by the 31st of December 2024. Next one, please. Now here we will make a small parenthesis and we will see the provisions of the Waste Framework Directive concerning the minimum requirements regarding extended producer responsibility schemes. And those are, the schemes have to define the roles and the responsibilities of all actors involved, meaning producers, organizations implementing extended producer responsibility obligations on the behalf of producers, waste operators, local authorities, reuse operators. Furthermore, quantitative waste management targets have to be set, and reporting system has to ensure the provision of data placed on the market and waste collected and treated. The scheme has to treat producers equally, regardless of their origin, their size, and without placing a disproportionate regulatory burden on the producers. Also, there should be information about waste prevention, reuse possibilities, take back possibilities, collection systems, and information on how to prevent littering. Next one, please. There should be a clearly defined geographical product and material coverage without limiting to those areas where the collection and the management of the waste are the most profitable. There should also be waste collection systems that are appropriately available, and also the scheme should have the proper financial and organizational means in order to be available for the users. There should be a self-control mechanism concerning the financial management and the quality of the data. And there should be information to the public concerning the performance of the scheme, whether the waste management targets have been attained. There should be information about ownership, membership, how much do producers pay, what are their financial contributions, and there should be transparency on the selection procedures taken place for selecting waste management operators. Next one, please. Finally, the costs to be covered are the cost of separate collection of waste, its transport, its cost of its transport and treatment, and the cost for awareness raising, data gathering, and reporting. Only the necessary costs should be covered. There should be a monitoring and enforcement framework established by the member states, ensuring the appropriate operation of the scheme. There could be, and there may be, an independent body overseeing the implementation of the scheme. Member states should allow producers to be represented, and member states should enforce producers wanting to sell to another state to be represented. Member states, the scheme should allow a regular dialogue between all stakeholders and ensure that commercially sensitive information is kept confidential. So here we close the parentheses. Next one, please. And we go to the request of the Commission to the European Standardization Committee, asking for a standard for the circular design of fishing gear. Next one, please. Now, why has the Commission asked for this standard? Well, someone could say because the Single-Use Plastic Directive says so. Yes, but the underlying reasons are that we want to increase reusing and recycling of end-of-life fishing gear. There is high recycling potential in end-of-life fishing gear, which could contribute to circular economy. At this stage, there are no other product requirements concerning fishing gear compared to some other single-use plastic products, cups, lids, plastic bottles, for instance. In parallel to environmental gains, we could also, companies could have additional competitive advantages and financial gains. We could reduce CO2 emissions by reducing the use of virgin materials, and of course, we could help this standard could help reducing marine pollution and therefore helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal of 14.1. Next one, please. Now, this request, this Commission decision requesting for the standard was adopted on the 10th of February 2021 and asks the committee to provide the standard by the 1st of May 2024. Next one, please. Now, requirements set by the Commission towards the European Standardization Committee to take into consideration while developing the standard. Now, those requirements are of general nature, of technical nature, circular nature, environmental nature, even requirements in relation to guidance on how to implement the design of this standard. I will not go through all bullet points, but just mention a few of them. For instance, the Commission is asking the European Standardization Committee to consider ease of use, ease of maintenance, ability to be repaired, remanufacturing, reusing, easy separation of materials, less use of virgin materials, and more use of recycled, renewable materials. Replace problematic materials, for instance, lead. Take into consideration the functionality of the fishing gear, the quality, the durability of the gear, its performance, economic aspects, ending up with the production of fishing gear which is affordable for the fishermen to buy. Next one, please. Consider product as a service, gear leasing, buyback project. Try to link the waste flow, the waste stream of fishing gear, and combine it with other waste streams in order to have more volume, better logistics, less costs. Incorporate the cost of littering in the standard. Provide manuals, digitize product information, use labeling, marking, give information on how to dispose, where to dispose, even think of rewarding highly sustainable gear compared to other gear. How less fees, less taxes, use benchmarking techniques, review the whole process. Next one, please. So to close my presentation, some milestone dates. As I mentioned before, the first reporting year for data to be submitted on fishing gear placed on the market and waste fishing gear collected, calendar year of 2022. The European Standardization Committee has to provide the design for the circular, has to provide the standard for the circular design of fishing gear by 1st of May 2024. By end of 2024, member states to establish extended producer responsibility schemes and set national minimum annual collection rates, and the Commission to evaluate the single-use plastic directive by 3rd of July 2027. Next one, please. For those of you interested in reading more details, I would suggest the European Green Deal, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the directive, the Single-Use Plastic Directive itself, the Waste Framework Directive, and in particular Articles 8 and 8A of that directive, the request of the Commission towards the European Standardization Committee for the standard for the design of circular fishing gear. Next one, please. And another two documents, the Commission decision laying down the format for the data to be reported for gear placed on the market and waste fishing gear collected. And finally, the Commission impact assessment report, which preceded the drafting of the single-use Plastic Directive. Next one, please. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this presentation and the information in it useful. Thank you. Martin, I cannot hear you.
Yeah, I'm doing the classic Zoom thing of I need to unmute, so I've unmuted. So thank you very much, Kostas. And just a couple of questions before we move into the Q&A, because I do see some 5 questions there, and please add more questions if you wish. And again, I note again that we'll check the Q&A first, and not the chat. So if you have questions in the chat, move them across to the Q&A. So just a couple of points of clarification. So in terms of thinking about the producers, we know that we have manufacturers of fishing gear. We also know in fishing gear there's assemblers, people who are assembling different components from different parts of the world. Is there within the broader definition of producers, as I remember it, at least from other directives, and perhaps it is also true for this directive, it's often referred to as those who place the product on the market. So others include importers, maybe even distributors. So perhaps you could just sort of comment on that issue of placing a product on the market.
Well, the Single-Use Plastic Directive, Martin, gives the definition of producer. Now, when it comes to who is considered to be a producer under for what type of product, we need to take into consideration the directive that is related to that product. There may be differences between directives on different products, and that's why we have the Single-Use Plastic Directive, which focuses on single-use plastic products and fishing gear. So we have to look at that directive, not to other directives, because there may be some differences there. If you to take, for example, the Waste Framework Directive simply says that a producer is the one who manufactures, sells, or places the product in the market. The Waste Framework Directive does not clarify that in the case of fishing gear, fishermen are not to be considered as producers. So when it comes to who is a producer and who's not, we have to look at the definition within the particular directive.
Okay, one area that you also sort of touched on a little bit was what are your thoughts in terms of the area of sort of market surveillance, you know, and sort of further down the line, you know, in terms of market surveillance and you know, sort of non-compliance. Are there any? Do you have any comments on that area?
Well, the directive states that the Waste Framework Directive says among the minimum requirements for extended producer responsibility schemes that there has to be monitoring and enforcement. Mm. So member states have to set up those mechanisms in order to ensure that those schemes are operational in practice. The measures they may have to take, it is up to them. Directives are to be transposed in national legal frameworks according to the possibility, according to the possibilities and availabilities of the member states themselves. The Single-Use Plastic Directive does say that member states should provide for penalties in case of infringements. Therefore, member states have to ensure that there are rules established that enforce the proper operation and take care of infringements that may arise.
Okay, and I guess the last question from me is, perhaps you could just highlight the role of sort of DG Mare and DG Environment in the whole in the whole picture. What areas do DG Mare pick up? What areas do DG Environment pick up? And any other key Commission stakeholders that producers or policymakers should be aware of? Yeah,
well, the Commission is, let's say, the Commission has its Director General, its departments, and of course, its department does not have its own, let's say, castle built around it and being separated from all other departments. So the Single-Use Directive refers to two particular products: single-use plastic products and fishing gear. So, and also this directive is an environmental directive, if I could call it like that. And since it has a wide, let's say, scope, I would say that the leading Director General concerning this directive is DG Environment, and as DG Mare, we are providing feedback in relation to marine litter and fishing gear. Now, this doesn't mean that if someone outside the Commission wants to contact the Commission in relation to this directive, should be troubled. Oh my God, where do I send my question? Who do I contact? I mean, if you contact Environment and the matter relates to Mare, it will be transferred to Mare, and vice versa.
Great. I think we'll open it up to the Q&A now. So, Ros, do we have any questions?
We have got questions. Our first question is from Willie. Has the CEN Committee of Fishing Gear established liaison with the joint work by TC 323 and TC 207, SC 5, JWG 14 on secondary materials, or does it intend to do so?
Well, the Committee for the Standardization of the Committee for the Design of a Standard, the Committee for Producing a Standard for the Design of circular design for fishing gear has started recently. I cannot at this stage comment on the work of the committee. I would suggest, if you have such questions, better to contact the committee itself.
And just a point of note that the Secretariat is NEN, the Dutch standards body, so they're probably, as Costa said, a good starting point. So do you have a second question there, Rose?
Yes, I have. Well, there's another few from Stefan. What about parts of fishing gear and that, for example, is it dolly ropes that cannot be collected anymore because they are intentionally or occasionally lost to the marine environments?
Wait, I'm reading the question.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it is from Stefan Kabaski, I think.
That's right.
Well, first of all, when member states are to report gear collected, waste fishing gear collected, they are going to report the weight of that gear. Now, there is no, let's say, provision at this stage about separating waste within waste. So what they are going to report is waste gear collected. Now, if dolly rope cannot be collected anymore, well, one of the requests and the requirements of the Commission decision requesting for the standard for the circular design of fishing gear is for the committee to consider to replace material. Of course, whether this is going to take place or not, it's something I cannot comment right now. The work of the committee is ongoing.
Okay, the next question is from Joel. Do you want to read that one?
The 27% figure for beach litter in the EU consisting of fishing gear. What is the metric for this? I read by mass, by item count. It is by item count. There is the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the Commission, has performed a study that took into consideration measurements and counting of beach litter that took place actually on European beaches, and they were counting macro litter, and indeed it is by item count.
Okay, and then when referring to producers,
there is also another one referring to producers. It appears that it will be the sellers. Well, here I can only refer back to the definition, because the definition of fishing gear in the Single-Use Plastic Directive provides that producers are manufacturers, importers, sellers, people placing products on the market. So there could be a manufacturer selling directly. There could be a representative of that manufacturer in a member state selling that product.
Great. If Ros, you could just read the questions out for the audience, so the audience know the question, and maybe then Kostas can also read in parallel.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe you want to read the next one, Ros?
The next one is from Tommaso. How can the EPR scheme be practically implemented for small shops selling pieces of nets, which is very common in Italy, as fishermen build their own nets?
First, I would like to clarify that the Commission directives set some requirements that member states have to implement in the territory of in their territories based on the particular circumstances prevailing in those particular member states. So what, for instance, Italy should do in the case of small shops selling pieces of net, it's something I cannot provide a reply. This is for the Italian authorities to reply, because they are the ones having good and thorough knowledge of prevailing situation and circumstances in Italy. Now, another thing I would like to mention is that the Single-Use Plastic Directive provides for the separate collection of waste fishing gear, but we also have the Port Reception Facilities Directive, which provides for waste fishing gear to be collected at ports. So one point of collection is going to be ports, small ones, big ones, where fishermen go there, allow me the expression, park their boats and deliver waste collected at sea.
Okay, the next one is from Ian. Regarding comments in the Waste Directive parenthesis and EPR, necessary costs not exceeded. This seems to legislate to EPR support for a lowest capital solution to waste management only and reject a high value recycling solution that has a higher capital cost, but can run it at a profit. It seems to be a perverse incentive, or are they misunderstanding the position?
Yes. Now, the Waste Framework Directive and the Single-Use Plastic Directive state that the necessary costs are to be covered. Now, there is no reference about a profit. This does not necessarily, in my view, mean that there should be no profit. Of course, if you want to enter into circular economy, you have to provide also incentive for someone to do that. What, in my view, what the directives want to say is that when you charge costs, you charge the necessary costs. It doesn't say anything about profit. Of course, if you want to run a business, nobody will force you to run a business without having any profit.
Okay, the next one is the definition of fishing gear is now quite broad and also aimed at capturing marine species. Fishing gear that is only used to capture non-marine species, like fresh, for example, freshwater fisheries, are they included as well? And will there be more guidelines from the EC on this, or is it up to the MS?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not the first time I'm hearing this question. Although I'm just 4 months in DG Mare, I have heard this question before, and my understanding is that fishing gear is of dual use. That fishing gear is used, the same fishing gear can be used or could be used both in a marine environment or in a freshwater environment. And even if there is a manufacturer who may say this fishing gear is only for marine environment or only for freshwater environment, this does not mean that a user may buy this and indeed use it only according to the instructions provided by the manufacturer. That's why, in my view, the definition of fishing gear says equipment used and not giving another word as destined or appropriate or something similar, but used. And used to do what? Target, capture, or rear marine species. Therefore, if there is gear used in the marine environment, it could be used also in freshwater environment. So therefore, there is no distinction between the two different environments, marine or freshwater.
Okay, this one, two from him. Fishing gear consists of chains, netting, bobbins, ropes, etc. What is the weight that is being taken into consideration regarding EPR?
Well, there I can only refer to the implementing act, the Commission decision on the format of the data to be reported by member states regarding fishing gear placed on the market and waste fishing gear collected. For both data, what is asked is the data to be reported in terms of weight, kilograms.
Okay. Just 1 second, Ros. We're at 10 o'clock now. Kostas, are you okay to stay with us and pick up a couple more questions?
For another 10 minutes. I mean, how many questions do we have still? Oh, there are a bit of a lot. Okay, let's try to go as quickly as possible. Okay. Oh, now I scrolled and I forgot which one, which question we are.
The first one from Pim, and there's 3 from him.
Maybe you could bundle those together. Try and bundle those together. Take the essence.
I'm going to bundle the last 3 of his together. Some of these materials are not specific to fishing gear, but for general use, such as rope and chain. How to distinguish this in fishing gear?
It's all fishing gear.
It's all fishing gear.
Yes, if you look at the definition, it's all fishing gear. Going to the next one.
Okay. In the Netherlands, 70% of the gear is manufactured by fishers themselves. How can an EPR scheme work?
Well, I haven't seen this number, 70% of gear manufactured by fishers. So what do we mean by manufacturer? That they produce the plastic nets? So maybe do we mean assembled by fishers? But I would say nets are produced by companies producing plastic nets. So maybe there is a confusion here between manufacture and assemble.
Okay, that's a good one from Arabelle. Is there any provision made under the EPR scheme for net cuttings that are produced when nets are repaired by fishers at sea? Would that not be considered the responsibility of fishers rather than net producers?
The single-use plastic directive refers to fishing gear. Fishing gear is let me go again. Sorry, let me go again to have it in front of me.
Okay.
Well, it refers also to pieces of equipment that are attached. So it's not just the net, it's all the equipment. Now, if there are, let's say, repairing materials that are to be used, even those repairing materials, when waste is delivered, they are going to be attached to the net or to the fishing gear that is delivered as a waste at the port, at the appropriate port facility. So from the moment that you are repairing a net and you're using some kind of material, then this is part of the waste fishing gear.
I think just to perhaps clarify that one, I think what we've picked up in the research, there's some custom and practice where when there is a repair of the nets, either in the harbors or on the boats, that they're cut pieces of the net off. They'll use that, and often they'll throw those small pieces of net, rope or whatever, into the sea. So this is sort of a byproduct of the repair process. So what you'll see you see on the beaches of these small pieces of rope and frayed, and that's often a byproduct of the repair process.
Well, you just mentioned, Martin, that those, let's say, repairing operations take place at harbors, which means with harbors having the appropriate, let's say, waste collection facilities, means that these pieces of equipment, instead of being thrown at sea, are collected at the appropriate facilities. And now you give me also the opportunity to mention that those collection facilities, they only charge an indirect fee. So they do not charge a fee which is proportionate to the amount of waste delivered. And therefore, that gives an incentive to fishermen not to throw waste fishing gear at sea, but indeed bring it back to shore. They would not be charged in proportion to the weight they deliver, but they will just have to be charged on an indirect fee, which is going to be horizontal for everybody.
Okay. Also, he suggested, is there a possibility of a meeting between the fisheries representatives? Is it Eurotech, I think, EAPO and DG Marine?
Yeah. Well, there have been such meetings. I'm trying to recall now the name. There were workshops that have taken place, Spain, Italy, Portugal, where I'm just trying to remember the name. It doesn't come up to my head right now. It was not NetDAG.
Eurocode?
No. Okay, while speaking, I will try to go to my emails and see the name. But there have been such workshops that have been also funded by the European Maritime Fisheries Fund. And this workshop was presided by ASME, which is an agency of the European Union, and there were such workshops. I do not have any information at the time being whether such workshop is going to be repeated. That workshop also, I think, delivered the results of some results. I'm just trying to find the information. Just give me a second. I'm close. Yeah, okay. Okay, let's go further. I cannot find information right now.
Maybe for time, Rods, we could just kind of pick up 2 more questions.
Well, I think this is the last one.
Okay, fine, good.
I think. No, make this the last one. Are there any plans to include aquaculture gear as well? Or is this already implied in the current directive?
Again, definition of fishing gear. The definition of fishing gear refers to equipment used in fishing and aquaculture. So yes, aquaculture gear is included.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well that's excellent, and thank you very much, Kostas, for your time and your clear responses.
Thank you.
Sorry, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I must say thank you for this invitation. It was a learning experience for me as well. As I said, I joined recently DG Mare, so accepting your invitation to present this one, I found it as an opportunity for me to learn in more depth fishing gear and commission provisions. Thank you.
Okay, well, much appreciated, Costas. Thank you, Ros, as well, on the help on the questions, and thank you, audience. So I think without further ado, we'll close the meeting and see you at some meeting in the future, virtually or maybe even physically, sometime before the end of the year.
Let's hope so. Stay
Yeah.
safe, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye
Thank you.
now.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye. Bye.